Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am the almighty Zentaco, and today we're going to be doing another tutorial in GameMaker. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know I do have a Discord channel. Link is down in the description, and it is a fantastic place to learn game design, regardless of what engine you are using. Lots of people there who are willing to help you out. We can all learn together and become better developers. So this is a project I'm actually making to learn GameMaker. So this is not the one we're going to be working on, but this is the camera that I'm going to show you how to make. So I'm going to show you how it looks when we're done, and then we're going to start a new project and recreate it. All right, so let's get this going. All right, so as you see, we have this camera that follows the player smoothly, which is controlled by a variable, so you can update and change how smooth, how fast, how slow this camera lags behind the player. Also, there is a smooth zoom function we can control with the mouse wheel, but you can obviously set that to any key you want, or even have it triggered through, events and code, whatever. So this is what it's going to look like when we're finished. So let's go ahead and start a new project and get down to it. So start a new project and click on GameMaker language. Go ahead and type in your project name. This is going to be camera tutorial. And there we go. Okay, we're going to need a few things first. We're going to need a character to move around so that we have something for the camera to follow. We're going to need a room larger than the initial screen size, the viewport, so that we have something to scroll to. And then we're going to need to design our camera. So I'm going to go ahead and... All right, so I've made a player. He's a little slime guy, and I've made a block. I've imported the sprites, and I have the objects made. All right, so we're going to go to our room. You can do that two ways. You can either, if your room's already open, you can just click on the tab at the top, or you can go to your Rooms tab and double-click your room. Okay, so we need a room that's going to be bigger than the viewport, or the window of the application. So to change the room settings, you go over to the room settings on the left and select the tab that says Room Settings. And here is the width and the height of a room. So just make it something bigger so that we have somewhere to scroll. Like, I'm going to do 5,000 by 5,000. Okay, as you see, the room has increased in size quite a bit. It's actually really large. I don't think it needs to be that big. I'll shrink it to 2,500. There we go. Now, since this is just a black screen, we're going to need to have something that we can actually see so we know that we're scrolling. And that's going to be the block object. So I'm going to drag that into the frame, and I'm going to paint it. You can hold Alt, and then you can just drag paint. And you can put these things down however you want. This is the worst looking level ever. But yeah, this is a pretty handy way to make levels. They have a nice little paint tool. Now, another thing to keep in mind, if you need to select these, see I can't drag select, so by default you have to click on them individually, but you can actually get a selection box if you hold Shift and then drag click. So you can get a bunch of them, then you could delete them, or move them or whatever. So that's super handy, keep that in mind. We're also going to need our player. Whoa, he's huge. He's like bigger than the window. Let's shrink the player. There we go. Something to keep in mind about GameMaker. Let's go ahead and play this real quick. As you see, the entire frame is visible by default. Or the room, rather. Frame is in ClickTeam Fusion. So in GameMaker 2, the entire room will be viewable by default. So your window will include the entire room. And that's not what you want, because obviously you want to be able to see the action, you want to zoom in on it, and you want to be able to scroll. So we change that by setting up a viewport. So let's go ahead and collapse the room settings. And we're going to click on Viewports and Cameras, which I already had open, so just click that tab there. And you want to click the button and select Enable Viewports. So now we have viewports enabled. So you have a list of 7 viewports you can mess with. We're going to deal with viewport 0. Let's go ahead and select Visible so it activates. And this window here, this little square, or I guess it's a rectangle, that is the size that our window is now going to be. And that properties is held down here in the viewport properties. So we have it set to 1024 by 768, and the camera is also 1024 by 768. And you can modify these to be whatever you want. But if we run it, you're going to see that now we can only see the window only shows what is in this box. So we're going to control where this box is at, and that's going to allow us to scroll. Important distinction here. The viewport is the size of your application window. The camera is the size of what is going to be shown in that application window. So if we shrink the size of the camera, it'll actually zoom in, but you'll retain the size of your window. So let's go ahead and have this. We'll say 512. What's half of 768? 384. Okay, so we've now shrunk the size of the camera. So if we play it now, you're going to see that the window remains the same size, but the camera is zoomed in. So this is the these are the variables that we're going to be controlling to zoom in and out. Let's go ahead and resize that back to 1024 by 768. Okay, so there's actually a really easy no-code way for having the camera follow a object, which I will show you right now. So if we click on viewport 0, we can actually have the camera follow any object we want by selecting under this object following tab. We can select the objects we want it to follow. So if we select the player, it's going to follow the player whenever he moves. And you have the horizontal and vertical border. That is the distance from the horizontal or vertical border before the camera will start following the object you have set. So it gives you some buffer room. So if we set it to half of the size of our viewport, then it will essentially center completely on the player. So if we go ahead and run, we will see that it scrolls exactly as we would anticipate. It centers it perfectly on the player. Now it's not very elegant and it's not very smooth and we can't zoom in, so that's why we're going to create a camera object and do this manually through code. Alright, so go ahead and uncheck the player because we're not going to follow an object. We're going to do this through code like I said. And we're going to do that, we're going to need a camera object. So under objects, right click, create an object, and we're going to name it camera. And I'm not going to give it a sprite because we don't actually need to see the camera. Okay, so we're going to need two events. We're going to need a create event. This is the event that runs when the object is created. And we're going to need a step event. Okay, so under the create event, we're going to initialize a new variable. We're going to call this target. And this is going to be the target of the camera. So we can change this variable and it'll allow the camera to target on different objects. And we're going to set it by default to obj player. Okay, in the step event, we are going to have the camera follow our target. First, we're going to go ahead and allow the camera to follow the player, but we're not going to do it smoothly. We're going to do it very simply. So we're going to do that this way. We're going to set the x of the camera object to be target.x, which is going to be currently the x of the player object. The y is going to be target.y. Now all we need to do is have the camera center on this x and y. So we're going to do that this way. Type in camera, and it's going to be camera set view position. Now we need to fill this in, the parentheses, with the camera, the x, and the y. Now at first I thought because our camera was 0 that you could just type 0 and then like x and y. That doesn't work. The 0 here does not work. There's actually a specific way you need to reference the camera, and I don't know why, but that's how they want you to do it. So to reference camera 0, it's actually view camera, and then you need brackets with the number, like so. And I think that's annoying. So what I'm going to do is actually set up a temporary variable to reference the camera so that we don't have to type that in more than one time. So let's go ahead and set that up here. We'll say var to set up a temporary variable, and we'll call it cam ID. And we're going to set that to be equal to view camera 0. So then we're going to replace this here, this view camera 0, with cam ID, because I think that's more readable. All right, so now we need an X and Y position where we want the camera to follow. Well, since the camera object has been updated to equal the target's X and Y, we can just set that to X and Y. Close with a bracket. And now we're gonna have a very unsmooth basic camera that will follow the player. Okay, I forgot to do something vital. Go to the room and drag the camera into the room. The camera will not function unless it's in the room. Code that is not in the room does not run. All right, let's check this out and see if it works. And as you see, it does work. It follows the player. Now we have a problem though, and that's that it follows the player without having any sort of offset. So we need to create an offset so that it actually centers on the player. So now we're going to need to center the camera, since obviously we don't want it to follow our player in the top left. So we would do that normally by just subtracting half of the size of the camera view. So like, you know, if we didn't want to do it with variables, which you should use, I think right now it'd be 512 and then like 380 something. I'll say 384. That'll be relatively centered. So if we subtract these numbers from this camera, it will center our player roughly. But we're going to do this with code. So this is just to show you that that's how it works. So we need to replace these numbers with some variables. So let's set up some variables, some temporary variables real quick. We'll call it cam width. And we're going to set that to, see if I can remember this, it's like camera view or get, yeah, camera get view width. And then we need the camera name to go inside these parentheses. And since we've already set the camera name to the variable of cam ID, we're going to just enter cam ID. And let's do the same thing too. Let's set up a variable for the height. So we're going to say cam height equals camera get, sorry, I typed it in wrong, camera get view height. And again, we're going to use cam ID because it's easier to type. Okay, let's wait for that to change color. There we go. So now we've set up cam width and cam height. So we are going to subtract from the X cam width, but we want half of that. So we're going to multiply that by 0.5 to get half of it. And we're going to subtract from the Y cam height times 0.5. Okay, so now that should be centered. Let's play it again and test. Yep, so now we have our player centered right in the middle of the screen. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to set up the smooth scrolling camera, and we're going to do that by using a tween. So how a tween works, the math for a tween is its current x, so x equals x plus, and then you'd want the target x value, and you'd want to subtract the current x value, and then you want to multiply that by a modifier. So roughly speaking, that there is a tween. And it works simply by, if you think about it, you have x. So if you take the target x minus the current x, you know, that is the distance between those. And you're getting a percentage of that. So it's going, the further away from your target you are, the faster you move. The closer to the target, the slower you move. So it allows you to smoothly transition to your target. Okie doke. So we're going to do that this way. So currently we are setting the X position of our camera to the target X and the Y to the target Y. So we're going to do something new. We're going to say X plus equals. So that's the same as saying X equals X plus. And we want that to be target X minus X. We're going to need to put this in parentheses to make sure that this is calculated first. And then we're going to multiply it by a modifier. And I'm going to use 0.1 because that's a decent default modifier. All right, let's do the Y as well. Plus equals target Y minus Y. And we're going to multiply it by 0.1. So let's play it and see what happens. Okay, so now we have a nice smooth camera transition. It's not so rigid. Now one thing that's good to do though, instead of having this static 0.1, also like, you know, keep your spaces the same, just so your code lines up and looks prettier. Anyway, instead of setting it as this here, this static 0.1, let's make it a variable. We're going to do that this way. We're going to click on variable definitions, which will allow us to add variables that we can modify quickly without having to go mess around in our create event. So we can just see them at a glance. So we're going to call this scroll speed, and we're going to make it, you know, 0.1. But now we can go in here and change this to whatever we want, 0.5, 1, you know, well, not 1, but 0.1 is what we're going to keep it. And that's scroll speed. So replace our 0.1s with scroll underscore speed. And now our code is modular. So now we want to set the ability to zoom. So how do we do that? Well, the command for zooming a camera, or for controlling the size of a camera, is camera set view size. And so inside of this, you can see we're going to need the camera, the width, and the height. So that's really simple. We've set the camera to the camera ID, so go ahead and just type cam ID for the camera. And the width can now be anything we want. Now keep in mind, if the width is not a proper ratio of the original size or the size of the viewport, it's going to deform what you're looking at. It'll stretch it and compact it. The way that we're going to need to do this is to get the original size, and then, so like original X, and then we would multiply that by a zoom factor. So like 0.5, or like original Y times 0.5. So we need to actually figure out what the original X and Y are at start, and then that'll allow us to zoom it properly. So like here, if I say 512 by 512 and then we run it, you'll see what I'm talking about with the deformity. Womp. So everything's all squished now. Okay, so we need to set up some variables. I'm going to go ahead and do that in the create event. I'm going to set up an orig X size, and that was 1024, and the original Y size, which was 512. Is that right? Let's double check. It's 1024, 768. I was totally wrong, so that's 768, not 512. All right, so that now we have the original X and Y size set up. Now we can actually modify. We're also going to need to set up something called zoom, and we're just going to set that to 1 by default, because obviously when you start your game, you're going to want to probably have the camera be at its max size, and 1 is the factor we're going to use for that. Let's go ahead and create another variable, but let's do that through the variable definitions box, and we're going to call that zoom speed. And it's going to be the same thing as the scroll speed. We're going to make it 0.1, but you can play around with these numbers to get the feel that you want. Okay, so now we see we need the width and the height. Width first, then height. So it was orig X size, and then we want to modify that by the zoom. And we had orig Y size. And again, modify that by zoom. So that command there is all we need to do to control our zoom ability. So let's go ahead and actually, let's allow our player to manually zoom in. So we're going to do this real quick with this. If keyboard check pressed ord 1 equals true, zoom equals 1. Copy this real quick, paste it down here, and we'll set this to 2, and then we'll set the zoom to 2. So that way we can test to see how the zoom looks. Okay, so we have, as you see, the ability to zoom out and back. But it's really jumpy because we haven't initiated a smooth scroll. And we're going to use the tween just like we did for the movement. So we're going to go ahead and need another variable. We're going to call this target underscore zoom. And so what we're going to do is tween the zoom to the target zoom. So let's go ahead and just stick that over here. We're going to set zoom plus equals parentheses target zoom, just like before with our tweens up here on the X and the Y movement. Target zoom minus zoom, and then we're going to multiply that by the zoom speed. All right, let's run it one more time and see if the zoom has smoothed out. It should have. Let's find out. Oh, I malformed it somehow. What did I do wrong? Whoops. I just set target zoom to nothing at the beginning. So on the create event, you actually want to set it to 1. Or you can even set it to zoom so that they match. So if initially you have a different zoom than 1, your target zoom will be the same as your zoom. Okay, so that should have worked. Let's check it out. All right, so it does work. The reason it didn't work exactly as we wanted is when we're pressing the keys, we're actually setting the zoom. So we want to set the target zoom and not the zoom. The target zoom is the value you want to obviously modify. So let's go ahead and replace zoom with target zoom. And now it should work as expected. All right, so as you notice, while the zoom is nice and silky smooth, there's a bit of a pop. So we got to figure out why that's happening and sort it out. Okay, so to fix this little bit of a pop, what we're going to need to do is this. Grab the two variable settings of the width and the height, copy it, and we're going to need to move these. So after we set the size here, we're going to make a space and plop these in so that we're getting the updated width and height and applying that, because otherwise what happens is you are having a discrepancy in the centering of the camera. So it causes a bit of a pop as it updates. Okay. As you see, now we have a very smooth scroll. Perfect. So what is left for us to do? All right, let's go ahead and attach this zoom feature to our middle mouse button. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and make the zoom feature be attached to the middle mouse. So I went ahead and deleted the 1 and 2 button presses. We don't need those anymore because we're going to be controlling the zoom with the mouse. So let's set up a temporary variable. We'll call it mouse input, and we're going to set that equal to, I say get mouse? I think it's get mouse. No, it's mouse wheel down, mouse wheel up. So mouse wheel down minus mouse wheel up, and this will give us the direction whether or not we're moving the mouse wheel towards us or away from us. And then what we're going to do is set the target zoom plus equals mouse input. So what we're doing is adding or subtracting 1 from the target zoom. So let's check and see if it works. It does work, but as you see, we can zoom out forever, and if we zoom in too far, it turns upside down. That's actually kind of interesting, so keep that in mind. If you want an upside down view, you can always have your zoom be a negative. All right, so we need to clamp these values, and what clamping does is what the name suggests. It keeps the values within certain parameters. So let's keep target zoom clamped. So we'll say target zoom equals clamp, and the way clamp works is you need your value that you want to clamp. So that's target zoom, and then you need the minimum value and the maximum value. So the minimum value will say 0.1, and the max value we'll say is 5. Let's test it again. Okay, so now we can only zoom into here. And we can only zoom out to there. So that has fixed that problem. Also, if you notice though, what's happening when we zoom in, we're kind of zooming into the top left corner of our player. Why is that occurring? Well, if we look at the sprite of the player, it's at the top left. Let's go ahead and center that in middle center and try again. Okay, now we're centering directly on our player. That's a pretty high res little sprite we got going on there. Okay, so now we have completed the tutorial. We have a smooth following camera with a nice smooth zoom in and zoom out. All right. Well, I hope you guys found this video educational. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. As always, I will try to get back to you. But like I said, Discord's the best place to get help. So thanks guys for watching, and as always, have yourselves a fantastic day. Before